John Kerry and the top Republican Senator Mitch McConnell said on Sunday.
One, prepare a no-fly zone in conjunction with our allies, not implement it. The last thing we want to think about is any kind of military intervention. And I don't consider the fly zone stepping over that line. We don't want troops on the ground. They don't want troops on the ground. That would be counterproductive.
The other option that John Kerry alluded to in passing that I think we used frequently during the Cold War period is simply aiding and arming the insurgents.
Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell. Democrats have also voiced support for arming rebels. Bill Richardson served as ambassador to the UN under Bill Clinton, and on Sunday he said, quote, "What I think the US needs to do is covertly arm the rebels." Richardson also supported the idea of the US, quote, "developing a no-fly zone with international allies." But last week, US Defense Secretary Robert Gibbs did warn that instituting a no-fly zone would actually require US airstrikes on Libya. AlJazeera's John Terrett now joins us from outside the White House. So how significant were President Obama's comments?
I think what was significant about what he had to say today, and he was meeting, by the way, with the Australian Prime Minister in the Oval Office, is that he kind of put a time frame on things that are going on that we don't know about behind the scenes. They always say there's a lot more going on that they don't actually report or put out in a statement. And the President really touched on this today by raising, in his own way, the idea of the NATO meeting, which at that point was going on in Brussels. And we know that this is a meeting that goes on every day this week and will conclude on Thursday with a meeting of NATO defense ministers and defense secretaries, and Robert Gates, the US defense secretary, will be there. So we now have a way of looking forward and trying to second guess, if you will, what the administration and other leading governments around the world are trying to do with all of this. Shortly after the president spoke, the US ambassador to NATO took part in a telephone conference call from Brussels, in which he said most emphatically that the three things being discussed today, Monday, in preparation for the big meeting on Thursday, are in this order: how NATO members will gather assets for the humanitarian relief approach in Libya. They will also explore ways of maintaining the embargo against Libya, particularly the arms embargo, and then, and only then, will they turn to the idea of a no-fly zone if there is a desire among those around the table to do so. This is on Thursday. But he did go on to say that if there is an increase in aerial attacks by Gaddafi's military, and he specified that's the use of jets rather than just helicopters, then they would discuss the idea of a no-fly zone for definite. But he said that all members would require it to be referred to the UN Security Council for a resolution first. He also said that AWACS aircraft, those giant Boeing aircraft that survey from many hundreds of miles up in the sky, they're flying a 24/7 mission now over Libya. Shihab?
Since this idea of arming the rebels, either overtly or covertly, is gaining traction.
Yeah, it is. Now, this came out of the Sunday broadcast yesterday. You played the clip from John Kerry, a very senior Democratic senator here, and Mitch McConnell, a very senior Republican politician. And they were alluding to the idea of arming the rebels in Libya, either openly or covertly. Well, within the past half an hour, PJ Crowley, who is the chief spokesperson at the State Department here in Washington, D.C., has pushed back against that notion. He reminded people present that there is a UN Security Council arms embargo in place, and that therefore arming the rebels would in fact be illegal. Here's how PJ Crowley put it.
In the UN Security Council resolution passed on Libya, there is an arms embargo that affects Libya, which means it's a violation for any country to provide arms to anyone in Libya.
Also, in this past 24-hour news cycle, there's been a lot of chatter about divvying up that $30 billion of Gaddafi money that the US froze last week. There's been talk about giving it to members of the opposition. Well, today, PJ Crowley clarified exactly what should happen with that money. He said that it's not the preserve of the United States to hand that money out. It's been embargoed and preserved for the people of Libya, and that it's for a future Libyan government to decide how to spend it. Shihab?
John Terrett at the White House, thank you. Al Jazeera has confirmed that the French and British missions to the United Nations are working on a draft United Nations resolution that could lead to the creation of a no-fly zone over Libya. Speaking a few moments ago, the US State Department said it supports the move. Meanwhile, the 6 Gulf Arab states have now announced their support for imposing a no-fly zone over Libya. In a statement, the 6-nation bloc said it's a necessary measure to protect civilians. Let's go to the United Nations now. Al Jazeera's Scott Heidler is there. So the French and the British are preparing a resolution. Under what circumstances, though, might that actually be presented to the UN Security Council, though?
Yeah, well, Shihab, it's definitely whenever this resolution does come together, it's not going to be right around the corner. We spoke, as you mentioned, we spoke with both French and British diplomats close to this, and they said that they're very, very early stages of this process, that they're not even really drafting, they don't have a draft resolution that they're bouncing around or speaking with other members of the Security Council on the sidelines. They're just drafting elements of this no-fly zone resolution, and this is how they put it, that it's going to be the political and legal basis for a no-fly zone. In other words, most likely they're looking to have someone else, something else, if you will, another entity to enforce that no-fly zone. NATO has been floated as a possibility. That's neither confirmed nor detailed, but this will be the legal and political basis, this resolution that's coming down the line that we're seeing in the very, very early stages, that will provide the no-fly zone with just the legal basis for it from the UN Security Council. Shihab.
And what exactly did the Gulf Arab states call for?
They said that that there should be protection for the civilians of Libya, and they said they endorsed the idea of a no-fly zone. Now, the GCC, they have a mission here to the United Nations. It's a very new mission. It's only about 2 years old. And the GCC meeting in Abu Dhabi of these foreign ministers, they came out with this statement saying that the United Nations Security Council should specifically implement a no-fly zone. So then maybe we see a little bit more pressure on the Security Council here. The GCC, again, new mission here, not that large of a voice at the United Nations, but it's gathering with other voices out there in the international community that the United Nations Security Council should work toward a no-fly zone. Shihab.
Scott, thank you very much. The NATO Secretary General says attacks on civilians in Libya may amount to crimes against humanity, meanwhile. For more, let's cross to Stephen Cole at our European News Centre. Stephen.
Thanks, Shihab. The situation in Libya is topping the agenda of a meeting of defence ministers this week. NATO Secretary-General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said the world wouldn't stand idly by if the violence continued.
If these systematic attacks against the Libyan people continue, it may amount to crime against humanity. Many people around the world would be tempted to say, let's do something to prevent this massacre against the Libyan civilian population.
Al Jazeera has been told that shooting broke out between British special forces and rebel fighters on Libyan soil. It happened when a diplomat and members of the elite SAS were captured as they landed in eastern Libya. From Benghazi, Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdul Hamid has the latest.
According to our sources, when their helicopter landed south of Benghazi, it was during the thick of night, and I think they thought that they would go unnoticed then, but eventually they were received really by